People don't start out their careers thinking that they want to become an expert in resilience. But that's exactly what happened to my next guest. My next guest is Karen Dean. She's a best-selling Canadian author. She lives in Nova Scotia, Canada, right here in my hometown. And I had an opportunity to sit down with Karen as she talked about not only her own story, but how that story is relevant to every single person on the planet. If you're a leader, you're going to want to hear what Karen has to say, because she talks about the leader's role, but how they can ensure that resilience is within their team and their team members. Karen Dean, welcome. Nice to have you on the program.
Thank you so much, Gary. I'm so happy to be here.
Tell the folks a little bit about you and your background, how you came to write a book about resilience, because I'm really interested in talking about resilience in the workplace, but I know that your book is not specifically about that, but obviously you're an expert in that area.
So I've been an entrepreneur most of my life, since I was about 8 years old. And literally, I don't know if anyone remembers the Regal catalog, but I used to go around my community with the Regal catalog to all the lovely ladies, and they would order their gift wrap and gift cards. And that was my business when I was about 8 years old. And I've continued to run businesses in many different industries. I say I'm a self-taught resilience expert because everything I've learned about resilience that has been backed up by my studies, but I've learned from going through some really, really hard things in my own life, both business related and personal related. And I've combined them into my mission to help other people realize that life can be really hard and really crappy, but can also be really amazing at the same time. And the hard times don't mean it's always going to be hard. And I think we really need to believe that within ourselves, and that's what resilience is at the end of the day. And how I got to my book actually is quite a story about resilience, because at the end of June of 2020, I'm a single mom. I have been for 13 years to 3 kids, but my middle child, my son, who was 19 at the time, was diagnosed with cancer in the early days of COVID. And because he was 19 and by hospital standards an adult, I don't know how many 19-year-old boys you know, most of them are not adults, but I wasn't allowed to go in the hospital for treatment with him. When I'm going through my worst times is when I do my best work usually. And I had to sit, because I live an hour outside of the city, and I wouldn't have left the hospital regardless, but I sat in my truck in the hospital parking lot, and I emailed, texted, called all of these amazing women who I'm blessed to know, who are from all different walks of life in Nova Scotia. And I said, could you please write me your story of 2020? And I would like you to send it to me by next week.
There we
and
go.
I got the most amazing stories from women, because I think the pandemic had a different effect on women than it did on men. A lot of them get forced back into traditional housekeeping roles that they, had tried to get out of by getting into a career. And there were a lot of different perspectives about that I wanted to touch on. So I got 21 women to share their stories by my deadline. I self-published the book 41 days after I came up with the idea, and it just went crazy. It is now a Canadian bestseller, and I'm writing another book right now, which is more focused on my own story. So,
well, that's
it's a really
exciting,
cool journey.
and it's amazing how you were able to turn, and we hear these stories often, I guess, which is, to your point, what resilience is taking something that's challenging or something that it really isn't what we expected or wanted, and turning it into something bigger, something better, something that makes us more of that. So the fact that you were able to do that in such a short period of time, and hopefully things are progressed well for your son,
Yes.
as he goes to there. So as it relates to resilience and your definition of resilience, how do you think that plays out in the work environment for entrepreneurs and or employees that maybe are under a certain leadership style that they're not comfortable with, or something like that? How do you feel about that?
Well, I think, speaking for leaders, as leaders, we really need to be more in touch with the mental health of our employees and our teams, because teams that are not mentally healthy are not going to be successful. And I know that I'm around the same age as you. Like a lot of what we were brought up thinking was you go to work, you work, and you leave your work there, and then you come home and home stays home and work stays at work. And I really think through the pandemic, we realized that's not healthy and it's not actually possible because we have so many stressors at home and so many stressors at work, and we really need to be mentally healthy and resilient to deal with them in the best way. So I think as leaders and as business owners, we really need to look at that part of our businesses now, because you can know everything about marketing and everything about your finances, but if you're not mentally prepared for times like now when the world is in crisis, you really can't handle it that well. It's not just about being financially prepared, it's about prepared. I mean, it's mentally prepared. And we all have the tools inside of us. We just don't always know how to pull them out. And that's what I
So
talk to people about.
how do we identify those things and pull them out, either from ourselves, or if you're a leader, how do you help others? You said you're a parent. I'm a parent. My wife and I have two daughters. They're grown with families, and so how do you draw that resilience out of people?
First of all, you have to make it a safe place to do that. That's the biggest thing as parents and as leaders is your team, your people, your kids need to know that there is somewhere safe they can go to talk about things, and that they're not going to be judged and they're not going to be criticized. And that, sometimes people just need you to listen. They don't need you to tell them the solution. They just have to get it off their chest and then they'll be fine. So as leaders, it's the safe place. It's offering resources, whether it's having access to therapy within your systems, if it's access to days off, if it's a flexible schedule for someone who, is going through something really hard, whether it be a divorce or a sick child. Or I say I've been an entrepreneur because two of my three kids have both had very serious health issues, and there's not an employer on the planet that would have given me the time off that I would have needed to be there for them the way I needed to be there for them. So I think we really have to look at that. And it's hard when we're trying to build the bottom line to give someone some time off. But my argument for that is those people will be way more productive if they know they have that grace when they are working than if you're pressuring them to be there while their child is laying in a hospital room or while they're going through a difficult divorce or whatever the case may be. If you can give them the flexibility to deal with that situation and say, what can you do within this time? I think it gives them the opportunity to say, look, I still want to do this job and I want to do it well, but can I do it while working around this other really hard thing? And also as parents, I just did a post about this on Facebook a couple of days ago, but so often we're hearing our kids are doomed. They're never going to make it in this world. It's so hard. My two eldest children, who are the two who had the serious health issues, both were homeowners when they were 23. My youngest daughter, who's now 17, bought her own car before she even had her full license with her own money. I've not helped them financially at all. And just got accepted to university a year early because she chose to homeschool. I think we have to empower our kids with the belief in themselves that they can do hard things. Bubble wrapping our children isn't helping them. Paying for everything for them doesn't help them. We have to teach them how to be financially independent, teach them the value of money. My kids, the rule was from the time you got a job and earned a paycheck, half of every paycheck went into a savings account as long as you live in this house. And you can't touch it. So they all had this big cushion of savings that they earned themselves at a real job that helped them get started in their adult life. My kids never got paid to do chores around home. It was, you get a roof over your head and food in your belly, you're going to help out. And I think we have to teach our kids to be responsible for their own lives and to know that they can be, and that we have to remember we're not raising children, we're raising adults. And as hard as it is, because they are the people we love more than anyone else, our job is to teach them to not need us anymore.
No, that's true. No, it
Yeah.
is. That is, yeah. And I identify with what you said. Turn that back to the business and back
Mm.
to employee, employer, or leader and team member. Because leaders are not parents, leaders are not,
No.
but they are responsible for the well-being of their employees, which, in many smaller organizations and even some larger ones, sometimes you spend more time with them than you do with your family,
Exactly.
right? So how does that transfer in your mind?
I think it's the same concept, is that you also have to give your employees, as a leader, you have to give them the faith that they have the ability to do that job. I think a good leader doesn't lead. They they could walk away from the business and it would still run just as well if they weren't there. That's a sign of a good leader. Is
Mm,
you are empowering these people to be able to do their job, whether you're telling them how to do it or not.
mhm.
And, you're always going to be there, but they need to know that they can do this independently. They need to know you believe in them and their ability to do it. Like I said, the micromanaging stuff does not help build. These are adults. They know their job. So say, give them the responsibility, and they'll figure it out if
And
they aren't felt like they're under pressure so much and being watched so much and being judged and being criticized.
you
Um,
talk that you use the term, don't bubble wrap your kids, but I guess you can't bubble wrap your staff either, right?
no, and failure happens. I don't believe in failure. I rarely use that word because everything that happens that we consider a failure is a growing opportunity. It's a
Mm,
way to learn how to do it differently. So I think instead of, getting mad or upset with an employee because that didn't go as you thought it would go, have a conversation about, okay, what can we learn from this? How could we have done that better? Is there anything happening that maybe you weren't able to perform your best? Maybe that's where the conversation starts, that they're like, look, you know, I haven't been able to say anything, but I'm going through a really hard divorce right now and it's really affecting my work. We don't know what's happening in their life outside of work sometimes, and that's affecting their performance. So it's like I said, it's about being that safe place to have a conversation and knowing that they can come to you or somebody on your staff is that safe person to go have a conversation with. So we can now adjust expectations, adjust projects. Maybe that project is too much for them at this point in time and someone else can take it over. So there's lots of ways to make it work if we are flexible and give people the grace to be human, because
mm,
we all mess up, we all have bad days. And I think we just have to understand that somebody's 100% today is going to look different than their 100% tomorrow. But they're still giving 100% of everything they can that day, but it might not be as much as they were able to give yesterday.
no, that's a good point, a really good point. If you were thinking about equipping, like you go back to your children or our children, you equip them along the way so that they are, when they come to those moments, that they have some of the ingrained skills or the ingrained thought process for how they're going to manage a specific situation. How do you feel about that in the workplace? How do you feel that ties in there?
I'm happy to see there is a change in the workplaces right now that we're looking after psychological safety in the workplace, because that's very important. For generations now, we have brought in consultants or speakers or done workshops to help with, all of the marketing and finances and all of those parts of the business, but we haven't brought people into our workplace to talk to our staff about mindset and about, mental wellness. And I think that is very important right now because even within the organization, we do have a lot of organizations, bigger organizations have departments for this, but to bring in someone from the outside, which is where I come in and what I do, to just even have a 2-hour conversation about tools we can use, about mindset, about healthy boundaries and all of the things that help you become more mentally well and more resilient. I think it's very important that we look at those as well and hold them to the same standard as we would hold teaching someone how to be a better marketer or how to do better presentations or how to write better reports. I think all of that needs to come back to really working on mindset.
I know. If you're getting value out of this episode of Mic Drop Insights and Lessons from CI Thought Leaders, be sure to like, subscribe, add your comments. I'd love to hear them. I've had a lengthy career, right? 38 years at Canada Post, 10 years post Canada Post in the consulting world. And so throughout that career, I have seen that evolution that you've talked about, how organizations have shifted in understanding. A lot of them have EAPs or employee assistance programs now to support those kinds of things. How do you get over I don't want to say the word embarrassment because I think that's the wrong word. How do you encourage people to use those services?
Again, I think it just comes back to that safe place and to having the conversations and to being real with our employees, because I guarantee you someone in leadership of every organization has gone through something really hard. So I think it's about normalizing the conversations, normalizing that it's okay to show what in previous years in a lot of people's mindsets has been perceived as weakness. It is not weakness. It is actually the strongest, bravest thing you can do, to talk about it and to come forward with it. And not to be stereotypical, but it is scientifically proven that men do have a lot harder time with that, because men traditionally have been raised to be the tough guy. We don't talk about your feelings. I have a male friend who's a farmer on PEI, and I always throw him under the bus when I do talks, because he's like, I don't talk about my feelings. Men don't do that. My only emotions are happy, hungry, and horny. And I'm like, no, that's not real. Everyone has feelings and emotions. And I think somewhere you need to find a role model for everyone in your organization, especially for the men, to say, you know what, it's okay to talk about your feelings. It's okay to have feelings. It's about, like I said, normalizing those conversations, normalizing the fact that it's okay to not be okay. I'm just going to help you not live there.
What can a leader do once that person's come forward, and whether they're being directed to a particular program or an external support structure? Because obviously in smaller organizations, they may not have these structures, so they hire people like you and other consultants or other health agencies and direct people. What can a leader do in those circumstances? Because it's hard this is still somebody else's private space, and you've got to respect that's their private space. So what can a leader do in those circumstances?
It's sometimes very hard, because sometimes those people do need to step back for a length of time to deal with whatever situation is. But I think it's about asking, what do you need? What can I provide for you as your employer to make this easier? And let them talk and try to accommodate that as best as you can within the organization. People, like I said, they need someone to listen. They need someone to understand, this is serious for me. I know it's really hard. I know one organization that I deal with right now has one person who's been off on stress leave for a long time, and they're struggling with all the other employees are picking up the slack, and now it's having an effect on them. So I think we really need to think about policies around that from the beginning. Talking like Workers' Compensation Board has incredible information about psychological safety right now. And, provincially, they're looking at a lot of policies around it. I think it's about familiarizing yourself with what is out there, the leader being able to point to resources, being able to try to work it into your organization as best as you can. Because if that's an invaluable employee, which everyone is, you want to be able to keep them and make them feel like they do have a job to come back to. Maybe they are able to do their job, just maybe they need to do it from home for a few weeks while they deal with this. Working out what works best for you and the organization, because every situation is going to be different. There's no checklist of this, because every situation is going to be so different. And I think it's about being open to maybe doing things a little differently for a time. And I think, like I said, the pandemic really taught us that We can work differently and
Right.
still be productive. You don't have to be in your office from 8:30 to 4:30 every single day to be productive in many jobs. Obviously, if you're a Canada Post mail carrier, you do have to go to work every day.
Right.
But things that are easier to do at home, maybe that person has to work from home for a few days and that's okay. Maybe they don't have to be forced to come into the office. Maybe they have to work from 3 o'clock in the afternoon till 9 o'clock at night. Maybe not many people have published a book in 41 days. Maybe they can get the results done in 2 hours a day if
Mm.
you're looking at results instead of looking at hours in the office.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. Two thoughts came to me as you were talking there. One is the impact, as you said, on those that are, I'm using the term picking up the slack, and I don't think that's the right term, but let's say that
Right.
that's what we'll call it for this purposes, is because now how do you talk to those folks about the fact is that their colleague is not at the office, or their colleague needs a period of time away, so that they don't develop this, boy, so and so is not here, and and I'm picking up the pieces, and so on. Like, so I'd like to talk a little bit about that. And then the other one is I'd like to talk about, which I want to circle back on, is the person who feels by going to a team leader that they're jeopardizing their opportunities for promotion or for advancement within the company. So those are the two things I'd like to talk a little bit about. So let's maybe talk first about the colleagues who feel that they're taking on a workload that should be done by somebody who's not there.
Right. I think it's about involving them in the decision. So the team I'm talking about, I think there are 5 members in total. One of them is off. So maybe sit down and go, as a team, where do you think you can pick this up? Because some people's strengths are different than others. So somebody might be able to pick up these tasks quite easily and add it into their own job without it being having a huge impact. So I think it's about figuring out who those are so that one person isn't doing the entire job of the other person. Figuring out maybe if there are parts of that person's job that maybe aren't as necessary. I think everything is necessary, but maybe some of those aspects can be put, on the bottom of the priority list for a while so that you can focus on the more important things. I think it's a conversation. I think this is where you really have to involve your team instead of being the dictator and saying, oh, you're doing this now because so-and-so can't.
Right.
To involve them and let them take some ownership and say, you know what, we need to help out.
Right.
Everyone wants to support that person as realistically as you can. So say, what could you take on that is not going to put too much load on you, and have the conversation. Sometimes maybe it might mean bringing in a contract person, if possible, that none of these are like cookie cutter situations.
Yeah. This is where I think, kind of the skill set of what I do and my team does in that is we help people look at what they do and how they do it, and look at process improvement. And so we think of things to you said, can you do things that are a lower priority or whatever? I think there's a lot of things in people's everyday work that is, I use the term busy work. So I think, if you go into that problem or that situation with your team and say, okay, let's look at all of the work. Let's look at all of the key pieces that we need to do, rework what we already have and what's needed, and then create this new way of doing things, this new business process of how we get the work we need to get done. And in doing that, you're not just simply taking work from person A and dividing it up amongst the remaining people. You're looking at the entire workload, and maybe somebody who's in position B is now going to be doing work associated with position C and D because it just makes sense,
Right.
So, yeah. So I think it's, looking at your business processes as a whole and then reorganizing those business processes and saying, okay, what skills do we need for each of these business processes and who has those skills, and let's look at it that way. And that way, when you're taking that pressure off and you're also allowing the person who's not there to be able to come back into an environment that's been reshaped, that maybe provide a better continuity of coming back into the workplace.
Yeah. Or maybe provided an opportunity for growth within the business because you're able to prioritize something you couldn't before because everyone was too busy doing the other things.
Exactly.
Efficiencies can build growth. So I think, to your point, it's very important always to be assessing, what our jobs entail, who's doing them, are they the most skilled person to do that? With all of the new technology and everything, is there more an efficient way to do some of these tasks so that you can focus on this growth opportunity or whatever it may be? I think it's really important to always be assessing those things.
So let's pivot to what I said about the individuals who may feel if I come forward, I'm admitting I need support, or things aren't going the way that I would hope they go. I can't put all the focus and energy in my job that I was able to because I've got this other thing that's impacting that. How do you help those people get over the fact that they think by coming forward, they jeopardize their advancement opportunities within inside an organization because it shows them a sign of potential weakness or something of that nature?
Yeah, I think it's important to let them know that that's never a weakness. And I think that's a conversation that has to happen within your organization every day so that people understand that, because they are never going to come forward if they feel like they're going to be looked at as the weak link or as somehow less than because they have this thing happening. If we look at every human who has ever existed, so every one of us has gone through something really hard. Some of us deal with it better than others. Some of us don't need the time off. We all are different in how we can handle these things. We all have different support systems outside of our employment that may be good or maybe not so good. It has to be a conversation that happens before anybody has anything they need to talk to you about, so that they feel like that's not going to be the case, so that they feel they are safe to come and talk to you and that is not going to ruin their career because this hard thing is happening. Because 99.9% of the time, that hard thing isn't caused by them. It's things outside of their life that they didn't have complete control over. They are now just dealing with this thing. Like, my son got cancer. I had no control over that, but I had to jump in and deal with it. My daughter was diagnosed with MS when she was 15. It was a whole journey. I couldn't control that. So we can't make people feel like they are responsible for all of these hard things. A family member dies, whatever that might be. We have to, like I said, have those conversations always, make it a policy. I'm a big believer in the positive affirmations posted around our workplace or in our lunchrooms or whatever, so that people know that they're understood and that they're valued regardless, and that their contribution, no matter what that looks like, is important. Someone who is going through a hard time might be able to get something done in 2 hours that you would expect them to take 8 hours, just because they can sit down and really focus and get it done and say, I have to get this done because I have to go do something else. The expectation of the 40 hours a week to get so much done might not be as realistic sometimes as I need this done, whether it takes you, it might take you only 10 hours. Been an entrepreneur, like I said, forever. So I have a hard time sometimes with these workplace rules where you have to do something. I find sometimes people just drag it out for 8 hours because they know they have to be in the office anyway.
For 8 hours, exactly. Yeah.
They could have had it done by 10 a.m. if they thought they were able to go home or to do something else. So are we basing our employee performance on results or on how many hours they sat in the office?
People come to the workplace, they come to the workplace with a lot more than their hands. They come with their head, they come with their heart, they come with a lot of things that make them who they are in the workplace. And if you can tap into more than their hands, right? And then I'm thinking about more than, say, an assembly, even on assembly lines, people still think while they're doing the work. And you've got to tap into that, and you've got to be able to, draw that out of them. And so when, even workplace challenges, as you've talking about right now, we've got this global thing happening that's impacting a lot of businesses. And so you've got a lot of fear on the front line that people may feel that they're going to potentially lose their jobs or they're going to be laid off and so on. So resilience needs to be a factor every day in that? What advice do you give in these times right now?
I think that I like what you said about that assembly line worker and coming with more than their hands, because I think we need to tap into the thoughts of those people. That assembly line worker might have a brilliant idea of how to make that assembly more efficient, but we don't often tap into that because we think the managers or the people with the degrees and the, masters and all those things, those are the people who know the things. I started my working life at a sawmill. It was the largest sawmill in Atlantic Canada at the time. And the man who built everything had a grade 10 education. He built it from the ground up. And I think we really need to talk to our employees about, I know this is happening. Do you have any ideas of how we as an organization could tackle this? Because I guarantee you, some of those people who don't always have a seat around the board table have really brilliant ideas. And if we involve them in it and give them some ownership of how do we keep this ship sailing, I think that eliminates a lot of the fear, because now they have a say and now they're actually contributing something more than putting part A onto part B. And it gives them more value in that organization. And I guarantee you, there's brilliance that we don't even know about in those people.
100%. And that's the importance of creating that safe space, right? We talk
Yes.
about that safe space. That safe space is not only to talk about challenges that individual employees might be experiencing, but it's also that safe space to say, hey, if you've got an idea, if you've got a problem, if you see an issue with what's going on out there in the workplace where you're actually doing your day-to-day work, whether that's on a computer with a screen and you're seeing software that's not doing what it's supposed to be, or files that are being, misplaced or mislabeled or whatever, or on the assembly line, if you see things that aren't the way they're supposed to be, having that safe space to be able to talk about that is so important. And I think it ties into what makes a good leader is
Yeah,
that.
for sure. Having a way to do that anonymously in some circumstances is
Mhm.
also helpful, because we don't want to be the whistleblower or the tattletale. So if there is a way to present a problem to management to say, this is happening out here on the floor or wherever it may be, that you're not going to be, oh, she said this or that and get blamed for it, that then it can come into a team meeting and go, some issues have been brought to our attention. How do we fix those? I
Mm.
think that's important in some situations to have that anonymous way of reporting things so that people can still be friends.
Yeah, that's good. What about mentorship in around this area? How do you tie that into mentorship, into helping people open up?
I think, first of all, we need to accept the value of mentorship. And, a lot of people don't want to do something they're not getting paid for. And mentors typically aren't paid. But I think we really have to look at, within our organizations, who are the people who have gone through this and like have an actual distinct program in your organization, has policies around mentorship, has it built in as part of the job. People who've been here for 10 years mentor the new people. I actually have a friend who lives in Ontario who mentorship is her thing. She has done it for years. I think it's really important that we make that, again, part of the conversation, part of our workplace culture. It's our job to help the people who are new or are new to a role or are having a hard time. The buddy
Mm.
system, we called it when I was in university, but to have the people that are trusted have already been there and can be a help.
Mm. I think storytelling, you've written the book,
Yeah.
right? And that's, and
Mhm.
you reached out to 20 women and said, hey, tell me your story, right? Those stories are powerful because obviously
Yeah.
your book is become a bestseller. And as I said, it's got global great reviews on Amazon. How important is storytelling in mentorship and in helping people appreciate the need for resilience as a part of the workplace ethos, I guess?
I think that is actually crucial to, I think that is where we learn the most, because then we feel like these people are real. Everybody can relate to a story. So when you, as a leader, tell a vulnerable story about this happened to me and this is how I dealt with it, that is going to have so much more power than if you leave that story out and just say, do this. because I know you're supposed to, or I know it works. Being real with our people, whether it's our kids or our employees, our teams, is going to have so much more power than just telling them what to do. You know, you didn't always win every day. You didn't always have a good day every day. You messed up. There's nobody on the planet that, you know, got to a leadership position that didn't mess up somewhere.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think it's about being real to say, you know what? This happened one time and this is how I got through it. People will be like, oh yeah, I can
Yeah.
relate to that. And that's what I find when I do keynote speeches. Afterwards, I have so many people come up to me and say, I related to that so much, or that story, I felt like you were talking about me. And I think it's very important for us as leaders to get a little softer sometimes and to just be real.
Empathy is a key character trait that you don't often see on a resume, right?
No. And it's a transferable skill. And I find I talk to a lot of hiring managers. And I actually helped a friend of mine many years ago now. She had been a single mom for years with 4 kids. Her husband died when she was only 29 years old, but she did so many things that were transferable skills into the workplace. And now she's an Atlantic manager of a retail chain because the person who did her interview understood that those are skills that can be transferred. So I think we really need to look at that as well as, you know, we look at what are your business skills, but what are your skills outside of work that can actually add value to your position at work? Yeah. And I think it's, like I said, important to understand that the skills that people have outside of work may really be valuable within their work.
In addition, in addition to your book, you said you had another one coming out. Have you got a title for it?
I keep changing the title. So I don't have an exact title yet, but it is about resilience. It is a lot about my story and being real. You know, the subtitle of my other book is Raw Real Stories of Resilience. And so it will be my raw, real stories. It will be relatable to anyone who is an entrepreneur or owns a business. I talk about domestic violence. I'm a survivor. I talk about sick kids because, as I said, I've had 2 that have had a lot of health issues for 23 years now. I've been dealing with kids with health issues, but also raised them to be incredibly successful adults. And I think there's a lot of lessons there that I want to share. I talk about family relationships. I'm estranged from my entire immediate family, have been for 6.5 years. So I talk about the family dynamics and dealing with those. So there's a lot of different topics in there about just living life, and that actually might be part of the title. I was asked by 3 women yesterday if I have a podcast. So I've been throwing that idea around for years. I may actually start a podcast as well. We'll see.
Well, I think it would probably be a great idea. I think it would be a good, well listened to podcast for sure. I wish you much success with your book for sure. I think it's timely and needed, and you've got your life experiences that you've turned into something really positive, which I guess is another sign of your expertise in resilience. You didn't set out to be an expert in this field.
No, not at all.
But here you are being able to share that with others. I really find it's going to be an interesting topic for the webcast that I have, because it's a little bit outside of that continuous improvement guests that I've had on, but I think it's very relevant, being able to successfully implement change inside your workplace and leverage, the people that you have in driving continuous improvement. So I think the synergy is there, which is why I really wanted to make sure I had an opportunity to talk with you. So thank you.
Yeah, I think being real is how we get real improvement.
I think you're right. Well, I hope you got a lot out of that interview with Karen. If you did, I'm going to ask you to make sure you like the video, subscribe. This important topic needs to be talked about a lot more. So share this video, share the content, check out Karen's website, buy a copy of the book for someone that you know who needs the message of resilience in their life.